Donald Trump versus big tech. Bet on Donald Trump. Yeah, Facebook has still banned him from their platform, at least for another 6 months. That came out today. Twitter, their ban is permanent. This is about hurting him politically. That has nothing to do with January 6th. They've been lying about that since January 6th. Donald Trump is off of social media because he's great at social media. That's how he connects with voters. They know that, and they want to stop that. This is about stopping Donald Trump politically, but he's got lots of ways to overcome this. Let's review, though. He was a master at social media. We all know that. Actually, though, Facebook really wasn't his thing. It was more about his tweets. But look, even on Facebook, he did a lot better than Joe Biden. But they want to deprive him of this because he was great at it. And they're basically freaking everybody else out. If you say the wrong thing about the election, you might be in trouble on social media. This is totally unfair and totally un-American. Imagine Alexander Graham Bell. I've made this point before. Quite frankly, I think it's brilliant. He came up with the telephone. Can you imagine him selling the phone? Here's a telephone. You can have it. Talk to anybody else who has a telephone. But don't talk about the election of 1876. We know who won it. And if you say something about the election, we're going to know it, and we're going to take your phone. How about Thomas Edison? Electricity for everybody, except for those who might be writing something that Thomas Edison disagrees with, and then he takes your electricity back. Hey, back then it was a private company. We got to do something about this big tech situation, don't we? We certainly do. And isn't it interesting that the things that Donald Trump was so great at, social media, the tweets, connecting via the digital platform, and also connecting with people face-to-face, those rallies. First social media and the rallies. They basically banned him from having those rallies for the bulk of COVID. You think that might have had something to do with politics? I do. I certainly do. And how about this? The current racial reckoning we're having. Where did it really start? What was its genesis? Its genesis was actually securing more power for Barack Obama. Yep. I want to show you something. In the fall of 2011, Barack was about a year away from re-election. He was suffering badly with black voters. His support had dropped dramatically. This is shortly after he was elected in 2009. Take a look at these numbers with black voters. 92% approval, only 8% disapproval. Those are great numbers. Fast forward to 2011. 58% only approved and 42% disapproved. He wasn't delivering. He was not delivering for the black community, and they noticed it, and they didn't like it, and they certainly noticed it in the White House, and they had to do something about it in a big way. Enter Black Lives Matter. Trayvon Martin, remember that name? Teenager who was in a struggle with somebody. As the story goes, he was just wearing a hoodie, buying some Skittles, and was attacked by that George Zimmerman, that racist George Zimmerman. And this became really why Black Lives Matter was born, over this incident. But there's a hell of a lot more to this story.
My message is to the parents of Trayvon Martin. You know, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon.
The shooting death of Trayvon Martin was ground zero for racial division in America.
Trayvon Martin was killed for wearing a hoodie, quite frankly.
I decided to produce a film on how the case affects American politics to this day. It had started as a self-defense case, but then, out of the blue, they found Trayvon's girlfriend.
She is a minor child.
This phone witness led to the most racially divisive trial since O.J.
You got to check out this film, The Trayvon Hoax. It's a couple years old, but it's very, very relevant. George Zimmerman was exonerated essentially twice, found not guilty by a jury and initially exonerated by local law enforcement. Meanwhile, Obama changed his tune dramatically on race matters in America. When we first got to know him back in 2008, back when he was really seeking white support, he wasn't afraid to say things like this.
Too many fathers are MIA. Too many fathers are AWOL. You and I know this is true everywhere, but nowhere is it more true than in the African-American community. We know the statistics that children who grow up without a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and commit crime. They're 9 times more likely to drop out of school, 20 times more likely to end up in prison.
Fast forward a couple of years when his support with blacks was going down, and he was not afraid to wade into just about any racially charged case and pick a side.
You know, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. And, you know, I think they are right to expect that all of us as Americans are going to take this with the seriousness it deserves.
Sometimes his decisions to make statements like this were very, very strategic, and sometimes they were spontaneous. Do you remember the beer summit held at the White House between Professor Gates and a Cambridge, Massachusetts police officer? So here's the story. Professor Gates, well-known scholar, Afro-American studies at Harvard, happens to be a very nice guy, and a lot of folks know him from PBS. Well, he got back from China after a long trip and found that, well, his door was somehow locked and he couldn't get inside. Long story short, somebody thought he might be breaking into his own house because 2 guys were messing with the door. Cops showed up. He was ultimately arrested. He had an argument with the cop. He established that he lived there, but he had a bit of an attitude and things got out of hand and he was locked up. Now, charges were dropped. A lot of people who know Professor Gates, though, could kind of see how this could get out of control, how a simple misunderstanding, the cops were called by a neighbor, by the way, could lead to this guy in handcuffs. But once again, Barack Obama just took a side, even though he did not have all the facts.
I think it's fair to say, number one, any of us would be pretty angry. Number two, that the Cambridge police acted stupidly in arresting somebody when there was already proof that they were in their own home.
It's too bad that he always chose to stir the pot and take a side when he didn't have to and when he shouldn't have. Now, in his own book, which I'm reading right now, A Promised Land, he got about, what, $60 million for it? He says in this book that he could totally see a scenario where Professor Gates, who he describes as loud and cocky, could provoke even a restrained and mild-mannered police officer. That he was a cocky and very loud guy, and he could see how something like this could happen. But he didn't say anything about that, did he? All right, so the beer summit's happening. There's something else in this book that's interesting. After this is all over, Valerie Jarrett, his top advisor, pokes her head into the Oval Office, and they have a little bit of a conversation. She said that the coverage of the beer summit had been generally positive, although she admitted to having received a bunch of calls from black supporters who weren't happy. They don't understand why we'd bend over backward to make Crowley feel welcome. And then he asked, how are our black folks doing on the staff? Valerie says, the younger ones are a little discouraged, but they get it with all you've got on your plate. They just don't like seeing you being put in this position. Which position, I said, being black or being president? Too often, it looks like he made a choice of, not being president for everybody. I'll be right back.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.